my name is Jiménez. I'm from Boston University. You might know me online as Book Toss. I tweet and I specialize in doing critical reviews of graphic novels. So I have a very niche sort of view of the world. As an academic, we become very, very enmeshed and we become experts in a very small, laser-focused area. I think part of the reason why I'm going to be the moderator today is because I do not have any, as they say, I don't have a dog in this fight. I am not of the publishing world. I read books. I don't produce them. So I'm a little bit safer. I am not going to be afraid of saying anything that might piss somebody off because I have no vulnerability in this space. Keep that in mind because the authors do. I wanted to start this by actually talking about apologies, and I think this is probably one of the worst apologies ever written, ever. This is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold.
Been there.
It's legit, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about apologies. I want to start with that. And what I've done is I've collected a little bit of sort of fodder for the conversation. So you can answer these in any way you want. Why do apologies matter? What separates genuine apologies from phony ones? Who decides when it is appropriate to apologize? And what is the absolute worst apology you have ever gotten?
I'm actually going to go first because I want to name what I think an apology is.
Excellent.
And I want to, even before I name it, I want to say that so many people, well, I don't want to name any particular people, but often, up till now, diversity panels have been seen about as a way to go to learn how not to mess up. That's not going to happen. And so the first tenet, when I contacted all of these people, I'm like, the first tenet of this conversation is that there will be mistakes. Do not think you're leaving here learning how not to make mistakes. That said, what do you do once you've made the mistake? And the more that we get involved in recognizing the importance of diverse literature, the more mistakes there are going to be. A mistake has 3 parts plus an apology has 3 parts plus homework. The first part is where you actually say you're sorry for what you did. I think that apology before actually does cover that. I ate the plums in your icebox. Like, I did a thing. The second part of that apology is thank you. Thank you for pointing out to me that I have wronged you. Thank you for saying something. It is not fun to call someone out. So thank you for trusting me with that information. And in the future, I'm going to, whatever you're gonna do, so that you don't do the same thing again. So it's, I did a thing, thank you for bringing it up to me, here's what's gonna be different in the future, and then you still have all those emotions. Your homework is go talk to someone else about them. I don't need to know why you feel bad. I don't need to know the whole explanation. I don't need to know why it happened. I don't really care why it happened. But you need to figure out why it happened. So go talk to a person who shares that privilege. That's an apology.
The last thing you said, not caring. I think I do care, right? That's just me. Was honored to, and I feel like it is an honor because it was such a great experience to be in conversation with someone who became a hashtag while it was happening. And fortunately, that person was, I don't know if it was apologetic, but ashamed initially. And that opened up a really, really genuine conversation about what happened, why it happened, and what possibly needs to happen next. And it was eye-opening for me because it gave me some insight into how is it that we mess up sometimes. And to me, it's more than just a mistake. I'm realizing that these sorts of mishaps are part of like a larger indoctrination. Whatever those harms are, we are all trying to really decolonize. Even if you are a descendant of colonizers, we've all been, part of like the description was F-bombs.
Yeah.
I got one. I think we've all been like mind fucked by colonization. And we're all trying to figure things out as writers, and just because we publish a book doesn't mean that we've already figured it out.
Right.
So, and that was just one conversation. Maybe I don't want to know why everyone fucks up, but it was just an eye-opening, like, wow, you really don't know. You do care about the children. You are a good person. You have a good heart, but you've been mind-fucked too.
Exactly.
First of all, when you said you were in conversation with someone who became a hashtag, I was like, did they get shot? Because
Oh, no.
no, now I get it.
Oh, wait, no. Their book became a hashtag. I'm sorry.
No, it's
Okay, I didn't even think about that. With someone whose harmful, very harmful book became a hashtag.
Right. I hear you. I think that point that we're talking about right now really brings up the interesting distinction of there's a really important difference between the public fuck up an apology and the private one, right? Because when it comes to my friends, and even this is limited, there's a chance I might care about why you did it. You know what I mean? Like you're with friends and in personal relationships and with personal transgressions, motivation actually does matter. Because we're in relationship with each other in a one-on-one kind of way, and if we're going to move forward, we do need to deal with the why. But with public fuck-ups, when you write a book that like adds to the destructiveness of my people, I don't care about the motivation. And your motivation, in fact, becomes a way for you to dodge responsibility, even while acting like you're taking responsibility, right? So I think one of the main things with the genuineness of apologies is like, besides the word if, which pretty much separates all real apologies from faux apologies.
Or but.
Or but, yes, or surely. There's also the sort of maneuvering that happens when people realize they're caught and they know enough not to throw the word if in there, but they still pivot. The if is sort of silent but implied, And that's when we end up hearing like very long stories about people's childhoods and upbringings and situations and families and everything else. They really are irrelevant. And, they matter to that person and they might matter to their loved ones, but I'm not their loved one. I'm the one they hurt. And I don't love them. So I don't care why they did it. And I think when they start to talk about why they did it or their motivation behind it or their intentionality, because usually their intentionality comes out being, my intentionality was not to offend. Like, no shit. I really didn't expect anyone. We're not dealing with the caliber of people that, we're not talking about, like the neo-Nazis, which are prevalent and out there, more than ever right now. But generally when we're talking about, they're not apologizing. You know what I mean? The ones who are apologizing are the people that would be mortified to, have realized what they've done, and they are mortified when they're called on their shit. So I don't expect them to have bad intentions, but their intentions cease to matter the second that they hit send or publish. And that's just a truth that I think we're still really wrapping our heads around, because again and again, if it's not them, it's their defenders saying like, yeah, but they're a really nice person. Totally doesn't matter. My people are still in the fire line at the end of the day. So I don't care how nice they are. It's just an irrelevant point. It's like, yeah, but they love fish. Great. Like, so do I. So I think like apologies matter. It's not just the words we use, it's also the way that we end up focusing the conversation. I think Alex's point is really important about, like, it's not that all those emotions that someone has post-apology or during apology don't matter, is that they don't matter to most of us. And so they need to deal with those for sure so that it doesn't happen again, but they need to do it with, find a loved one, write in your journal. Like, that's what it's for. Like there's important points of the process that do have to happen kind of behind the scenes. And we live in a very public world right now, but that doesn't stop us from having the option to step back, have conversations with, other people.
And I want to point out here that something that Evie said is very important. It's an issue of vulnerability. Mm-hmm. Who is vulnerable during this space? Because it isn't actually the offender. The offender is not the vulnerable party. And somehow we are forced to excuse that offense. Kiera, I'm gonna get to the next session, because I wanna focus our conversation on books, and I think that's the audience. So if we talk about books as objects, right, or as extensions of self, this is actually an argument in academia. And a lot of it is about this author intent question, right? As authors, what does it feel like when someone criticizes your book, right? I don't understand that because I am not an author. As a critic, right, what does it feel like when somebody receives the negative feedback or gives you negative feedback for your review, right? And then again, as marginalized people, right, what does it feel like to read, right, to actually go into that space of a book and read racist, sexist, homophobic, ableist, all of the ish. And how do we go about bridging this divide?
I'll start because of something you said to me earlier, Laura, of needing to have a Black person on this panel, because
Absolutely.
most of the offenses are centered around Black children or Blackness. So thank you for pointing that out. So as a Black reader, I did write an essay. I don't remember what it was on the Reading While White blog. I wrote a post called "Reading While Black." Now, as I said earlier, I have a long history with writing, and I also have a long history with reading. The first time I ever read something and threw a book across the room was by an author named Michael Resnick, who has a long history of writing dark, savage tropes. And I didn't know what that was, reading it at 19, 20. But then, the more I got to reading his text, I was like, wait a minute, is he talking about Haitians? I'm Haitian American. This idea that people certain people do not know how to govern themselves. And there wasn't any part, triggering words, it was the imagery over and over and over again. And I love news, I'm a news buff, and I would see those images, how Black bodies are presented in the news over and over and over again. So I started to make those connections and began, I had to be a critical reader, reading science fiction and fantasy. So when I see these moments, when I see words, I think the last book I read had the words tar black on, in the book, or there was a portrayal of a girl as a gorilla, or I've seen, Haiti being, demonized in a certain book that wins an award. And I know what I'm reading when I read these things. I'm not making it up. It's a visceral reaction because I was able to connect it to past experiences, what I've been hearing, what I've been seeing as a Black person, and to see it on the text, I can pick it out immediately. So it's a visceral reaction, and we can't always explain it. So when Black women criticize books online or on Twitter, sometimes we're not very nice about it because we're angry. Sometimes you just can't write a blog post with intellectual jargon or anything like that and just say, fuck it, y'all fucked up. What is this?
Right.
And it's not nice, and it is a dragging. It is, whatever it is that they call it, the vitriol. Am I saying it right? Yeah, that.
The vitriol.
Right. So, that's how we respond to it, and it comes with an anger because it's like 2017. We're like, really, still? So, that's my experience as a reader.
Well, I guess I come at this sort of, in a different kind of way as a critic, I suppose, as a book reviewer. When we get feedback, negative feedback on our review, so say, we give a glowing review to some book, and we publish that review, and then it turns out that the book has garbage aspects to it that we just missed, or our reviewer missed. Like Alex said, it's sort of inevitable. I don't know if I guess I do feel, bad and guilty that we published this glowing review, but to me that's less important than what do we do now, in some ways those reviews live there, they're not, unless it was just completely wrong, like we actually got something wrong, we would change the review, and sometimes we have done that and reissued it. If we just, screwed up in terms of like we missed something important, then we have to figure out a way to address that. Is it, talking to people with with those differing perspectives and inviting them to write a letter to the editor. We've done sort of like feedback posts on it. We've done almost like an opposing viewpoint sort of, a treatment with essays around a particular issue. And sometimes it's me going on Twitter and saying, wow, I really screwed this one up. I reviewed that one myself, and wow, did I miss some stuff. And thank you to the people who are putting themselves out there in a really personal way sometimes to point that out to me or to us in our publication. And we're privileged because we have this platform, we have a brand, and we have this way to touch audiences, and we're talking to librarians, and we're influencing the decisions they make on what they purchase or don't, and what they highlight and don't. So to me, I feel responsibility, more so than guilt. I feel a responsibility to do something and to do better. And so sometimes it's about that particular book, and sometimes it's about why did we miss this, or how did we miss it? And not just us personally, but our reviewers, and how can we do better so that they don't miss issues and problematic content like this in the future. So it's about education, it's about training, it's about finding tools and resources to help support the people doing this work so that they can do it better, and not making them feel bad about not knowing, but pointing it out and saying, you missed this, we missed it too. This is how we can get better. Read these articles, read these blog posts, follow these people, and get educated.
Do you want to?
No, I do, yeah.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So, as a trans person, my books are read almost exclusively by cis people. My books are reviewed almost exclusively by cis people. My books are sold and promoted almost exclusively by cis people. And the whole issue of own voices and what I often call near voices, because my way of being trans isn't the same as my character's transness, and we have different ways of being parts of our communities. I've seen books that make my stomach turn that win awards, right? Like we see this. I've seen, like, whenever I get asked online to like what recommendations I have, I think very carefully about all the books that are out there, and I very carefully have to decide what to name, because most of the other books are also written by cis people, as a book that I'm willing to say people can read and it doesn't hurt. And after I do all that work, someone invariably goes, some cis white woman, and invariably, don't forget blah, blah, blah. Honey, we have not forgotten blah, blah, blah. We are never forgetting blah, blah, blah. We still have nightmares about blah, blah, blah. So, and I don't know what this means for like reviewing books, like for magazines and things, but look at who the reviews are from. And are they from the community that the book is about? Are they from the community that the writer is from? Is this an inside review or is this an outside review?
Okay, I want to cut, just ahead of time, I want to warn you.
You're going to cut me off ahead of time?
Yeah, I'm giving you a
Should I even bother?
prequel. I'm giving you, so you're going to get.
You're using it right now.
Anyway, yes, the first time I booked a review, first of all, there is this kind of idea that, like, you're not, as an author, you're never to respond to a review, right? Which, like, there's a lot of different ways we can talk about that. That's a whole other panel, really. But I will say that it wasn't always the way it is now, wherein, like, now, if I get, like, if some, like, just review comes and misunderstands everything and it's some trash racist bullshit, I know that, like, Twitter's gonna step up. So, like, much as y'all hate, or not y'all, but a lot of folks, just talk about drag culture and dragging culture, not drag culture. The way that we drag each other and the way that we, like tear each other down and all this stuff, which can get negative, but it's important that I now feel like there's a community online that on some level has my back, which wasn't always the case. So in 2013 or 14, whatever, when I was co-editing this anthology called Long Hidden, and a review in Strange Horizons, which is supposed to be really on point, talked about how one of the stories used the literary trick of vernacular and did it to a way that was distracting to the story, and all these really demeaning, condescending, like just achingly condescending kind of ways of talking about this really beautiful story by a writer named Troy Wiggins. Which, yeah, so anyway, this whole review happened and they just really destroyed the story on the sheer principle of it using vernacular. And what really was hard about that was also that the white folks who were involved in that book with me didn't get it at all. And were just like, we got a great review, because everything else in the review was glowing. And I'll tell you, like, that was one of the most loneliest feelings that I had in publishing, in my early publishing life, was realizing that, like, they just didn't get it, and that, you know, it's not about fault. It just was like, wow, I'm out here on my own now, because I was at the gym, and I tell this story because it's important to think about the feeling aspect of it, because that really matters. And I was at the gym, and I read the review, and I literally saw red. And it was, I will say, a little easier, I think, to get in touch with my anger around it, because it was another writer's story, and I felt responsible to him as the editor. So it wasn't like just purely self-defense. It was like, no, you're not gonna come at this guy. First published story, incredible writer, no. So I just, revved up the old Twitter machine and like, just, let it loose in a nice little Twitter thread before threads were a thing, and storified it. And by the end of the day, they had retracted and apologized, which was cool. But I guess all that to say is, like, there is an emotional aspect to it, including loneliness, including rage, including needing to curse and all those other things. And, like, it's very important that we validate that and understand it, not just as a form of tearing down, but also as a form of lifting up. Because Troy was on my mind the whole time I was ranting. Not Strange Horizons. I don't give a fuck about Strange Horizons. I cared about Troy, this writer whose voice I really love and believe in. And the idea that, and any other writer who's planning on writing vernacular and feeling like they're going to get docked points for it by some, random white lady reviewer. I'm not okay with that, and I really needed that to be made clear. And it felt good that we brought change, but it felt lonely that it took, me standing up for that story for that to happen. And again, I'm happy that we're not there anymore, but it's important.
Okay.
And then.
But I'm not sure we are not there anymore.
Well, no, hold on. By not there, I just mean that there's more of us raising our voices.
Got it.
That's all. Because you're right, we're not there.
Right.
But go ahead.
So I wanna talk about fragility, because that is often, that is the elephant in the room.
I'm not comfortable talking about it.
Right? And I think this idea of fragility balanced with humility, we need to talk about it. So do you write outside your lived experiences? Because I know all of y'all do. Right? And Kiera, you and I both write critiques that are outside of our lived experiences. And you talked a little bit about that. How do you educate people to look and evaluate, right?
Yeah.
I think I want to get into that a little bit. So Kiera, do you mind leading us off on this?
Sure, yeah. As we know, the publishing industry is still largely white and looks a whole lot like me, which is problematic, and so is the librarian world. And when I first came on to not when I first came, maybe a year or so after I came up to SLJ, Jason Lowe at Lee & Lowe asked me, well, what does your reviewer base look like? Like, what's the demographics? And I was like, I have no idea. We should probably know that. We should probably do a survey or something and find out. And it was completely unsurprising. The results came in, and it was part of the larger survey that Jason did. And it looks just like me. Like 90% of our reviewers were middle-aged white ladies, very well-intentioned white folk, and that's problematic. So one of the first things we did was, well, we want to educate those people. We also have to get more people that don't look like us and don't think like us. So stepping up recruitment efforts and really being intentional about it, and not just hoping that they'll come and volunteer to review, actually seeking people out and asking for their input and asking them to review for us was a big part of it. And it's ongoing. I mean, we're not there yet. we're making progress, but it's slow, and diversity in librarianship is still kind of slow. The education piece has been important, though, because no matter what your lived experience, and there are we know that there's different intersections of experience and identity, and people bring that to their evaluation when they're reading, when they're critiquing. But no matter what it is, whether one of your identities is from a marginalized culture, doesn't mean that you're necessarily equipped to critique and really speak for an entire population or identity group. And so we really felt it was important to look into what the blinders are, like what are the filters that we have when we're going into that reading experience and evaluation, and what are the assumptions that we're making, and how do we just make people aware of that? It's, I think that's the first step is getting, especially the sea of white ladies, to sort of acknowledge their own privilege and their own blinders, and just say you don't necessarily know everything, and just because you don't think this is problematic and you don't feel it like at a visceral level that it's hurtful, doesn't mean it's not, just because you don't see it. And that's been the biggest challenge, and I think opportunity, is to educate against that barrier and sort of break that down a little bit.
Right, and I think, Evie, you talked a little bit about that. This idea of, right, having somebody tell you that you've done something, right, outside of your lived experience, and that it's damaging.
Yeah, I wanted to go back a little bit to something you said earlier, Daniel, about, was it Twitter that has your back? Right, something like that, right? I wanted to speak to the experiences of those who kind of, the quiet voices who do get negative or misinterpreted reviews and don't have the courage to shout out into the wind, hey everybody, look at this review, come have my back. And there are so many, and those are usually Black women who just, just kind of curl into a corner and take it like champs for a long, before Twitter threads. So there is a hierarchy in terms of people coming to your defense, to think about those voices who are not vocal and what it is that they do get on the receiving end. And we do know that when Black women speak up, they do get those threats behind the scenes, and those who do share those threats and those who don't. So basically that's what I want to say, that there are voices who are not vocal about what they're experiencing. Just knowing that the misinterpreted reviews are out there and we don't always speak up about them.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think part of what's going on with fragility and with white fragility is this notion of there are privileged people and there are not privileged people, and we're going right back to one of those binaries, which are my favorite things and I'm very good at them. If this is in transcript, please be clear that I'm shaking my head back and forth in a language in which that means no. Right, because and that's I think where a lot of, particularly the idea of the cis white woman, but I'm a woman and so I get shit. Yes, you do. And you're also white, and you're also cis. So I'm white, I have total privilege there, I am trans, I get shit for that. Right, we all have these different, and I'm not telling you this like it's new, but that's a lot of where the fragility comes in, is but I'm the one who's been wounded, we need to protect me. And that is a place of privilege, to be able to just focus on you and your one area of need. For a lot of people, it's 7 or 8 areas of need going in all different directions, so.
Yeah, sorry. That's it. Thank you, Evie, for that point. Absolutely. The time that was most starkly clear for me in my own journey was during the whole World Fantasy thing, right? Where I very vocally called out the World Fantasy Award, and Nettie Okorafor ended up getting the death threats because she'd written a blog post 4 years earlier that I referenced in the whole situation. And what I got was the dude bros being well, why exactly do you think Lovecraft was racist though? Technically. And Nettie was getting hate, solid hate. And it is very key to this discussion is understanding that there are different dynamics for different people, both in terms of speaking out, in terms of online presence and existing, and in public presence too, just being out in the world. All those things are layered with power. And I think that's what comes around to this question, is that again and again, power is the really deeply misunderstood element, and when it comes to how we think about people who aren't us and have different levels of privilege than us, usually because it's such an uncomfortable conversation. Talking about power, talking about privilege sucks, when it means, you have to own it and deal with the fact that you have that, and so we don't do it. And I've been saying for years, like when I was in writing programs and now that I teach writing programs and wherever I am, that writing programs need to think and talk deeply about power. It's an element of craft, but we don't. It's not dealt with in MFA programs unless I or someone, like that happens to be teaching there. Generally, it's like, let's just keep it moving. Let's talk about foreshadowing. Man, fuck foreshadowing. Gives a fuck. Power matters. If you can't think deeply about power, you can't write good conflicts. You can't write deep characters. It's a through line that runs through all of us through our interactions. It connects to context, to world building. It connects to voice. It connects to everything, but we're afraid of it as a community, and that's why we're here. That's why books will get through. How many people does it take to make a motherfucking book? There's dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people involved in reading a book before it comes out, and we're still talking about slavery with smiles on our face. Like, that's ridiculous. But we don't want to talk about power, so that's exactly why it happens. Again and again, and then they're upset that they get dragged. Like, it's very important that we start to have deeper understandings of these things at a root level so that we don't have to go through this over and over and re-traumatize ourselves constantly with the same books being put out again and again with the same, dumbass mistakes. They come down to power. They come down to people not willing to be reflective about stuff and understand their position in it, and we're going to do it again and again. So basically what I'm saying is talk about power.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think we also want to call out when, like Kiera does, right, when people recognize and try to fix. So recently, Little Brown, young readers, we saw this, and we meaning like the blogosphere, the people on Twitter, and my friend and colleague, Edie Campbell, put this out there and said, I can't believe this, was sort of what she said, and I tweeted back and said, oh, what's the problem? I didn't see, literally, I did not see the problem. Okay, let's keep in mind, I am Latino, I am a lesbian, I am a mother of two. I did not see this. I do a lot of work around critical analysis. Didn't see it. Until, yes. Jeez. Did you hear the gasp? If I could have bottled that gasp. This image of that little black moon is absolutely the UK's gollywog, whatever it is. All right. Yeah. And thank God, Sarah Gomez tweeted that image out. All right. And after a little bit, we did get a response from Little Brown. We appreciate your valuable feedback and sincerely apologize that these images were offensive. They will be changed. Okay? They will be changed. I wanted to take 10 minutes now because Alex is leaving, right? So we are now at 2:41. I get a lot of credit for that. So I wanted to take 10 minutes for you to have questions. Again, questions, inquiry, not stories or narrative. Not I don't want to shut down the questions, I just want to be clear. Yes, ma'am?
I wonder how the panelists deal with the emotional labor that comes with trying to grapple with fragility and also non-apologies and all of the other crap that comes with it.
Right, so how do you deal with dealing with, and doing something about fragility in books and publishing and all the other ish that comes along with it? Yes?
I'll speak to that and bring in something, Daniel, what you just said about talking about power, talking about this. I have children who go to really progressive schools, and the kids are learning to talk about this ad nauseum. And I realize that it just stops there at the conversation level.
Yes.
And the conversation stays at 101 because it's all talk. And when I'm in these classrooms, I just did a school visit, The conversation deepens when the students, Black children, don't have the vocabulary or the ideology. When they bring their personal experiences to the conversation, that's when it deepens. Because you can have, like, say, Daniel and I, right? You may have, like, the ideology. You're very vocal, you speak to these dynamics. However, when you pair, whatever it is you're bringing to the conversation with my personal experiences as a Black woman, it can deepen the conversation. So someone with all the terminology and all the ideology can easily not see that as offensive. But me having, like, dark-skinned children with curly hair, being in classrooms with dark-skinned children, knowing the images that were set forth, throughout history about dark-skinned people, I can immediately pick up on that. And I may not have the ideology or the ideas to back that up. So I don't engage because it's exhausting. Because I have to deal with that on a daily basis. Like this morning, I have to deal with microaggressions. And to have to, like, combat that on Twitter? Are you kidding me? No. So that's my personal self-care that I don't engage at all. And if I do, I'm writing an essay and I'm getting paid for it.
Yeah, to Evie's point, like, I think we easily, especially because there is so much talking right now, and there is so much calling out, it becomes really easy for people to make the assumption that if the call out isn't happening, then everything's okie dokie, which is really not true exactly because of what you just said. The emotional labor is intense. Like, it's already just a lot to be a writer and be, public in different ways, and then if you throw in both, the complexity of raising your voice, plus the question of fragility and wondering if, like, automatically you're going to be the bad guy, the bad brown or black, angry person on the panel because you lifted your voice on that or this. Like, that is exhausting. And it's an important question because it makes us understand that we need to practice self-care in a very major and radical way. Whether we're being loud or being quiet, both of which come with a cost. And that's really key. And we don't talk about it enough because we're so busy, selling books and being on the grind and running around and whatever. It's important. People will burn out and have burnt out when they don't practice self-care.
I know there are more questions, but I would like to add to this, which is that having your own people that you go back to is really important. Having the people that do know your stuff is really important. And I lost the other half of it. I'm gonna have to let
That's important. That is.
But having your own people, if they're right there in the black blazer.
So, I'm in publishing. I'm not an editor. I'm a designer, which means I get a lot of the projects that you guys come through because I'm one of the only people of color that in design, I guess. But that also means that, like, I watch like editors who are predominantly white have to deal with exactly that question of fragility with every submission that they get of color. Do you guys, and like I personally feel the emotional weight of having to have those conversations of pointing things out that I see. Do you guys feel like every time you start with a new collaborator in publishing, it's like you're re-educating them? And what's that like for you? And have you had good experiences that surprised you?
I've had really great experiences, and they have all surprised me. I wouldn't say I go in ready to educate, because I don't like educating. Like, I teach. Like, that's my education. I'm good. Like you said, pay me. Like, I'll teach your kids. But I don't want to have to be like educating and editing. I mean, in small ways, yeah. But if it shouldn't be that. I go in kind of ready, like I think all of us do, just in terms of like, what's this going to be like? In a way that's heightened because of the truth of culture and race in America. But again, like I've had really whack experiences, and those are all way behind me on purpose. So the great experiences are the ones that I cultivate, cherish, and hold on to very intentionally, which isn't always easy to do, and that in itself is a privilege. But you have to go in. Unfortunately, you have to go in ready. Like I feel like we have that whole conversation that we have to have. I constantly have with my students and mentees of color, where I'm like, okay, so here's the grid law. Here's like what it's going to be like. Potentially, you have to brace yourself for this. Like I always say, like victory means I don't have to have that conversation anymore. And that's a long way off, but I know I have a goal, because that's not a guarantee by any means.
I think that's part of the process. Something we didn't talk about is the overwhelming, and I'm just realizing the overwhelming white gaze, and I don't mean white gaze as a negative thing.
No, it's just a fact.
It's a fact. My agent is white, my editors are white, and it's a teamwork. And I realize that not necessarily educating, but just having conversations is part of the process of getting something right. And I realize even if I did have a black woman on the team, maybe similar conversation can, we would definitely have similar conversations because black women are not a monolith, even if there are men of color on my team. So that sort of education process is part of the work of telling stories.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left because Alex is gonna jet out of here with her representatives.
Hi, I have a question about reviews because I work in publishing, but on the academic side, which is another beast. But I do write YA reviews, and my question for you is, in terms of reaching out and making it a more diverse and also inclusive space for writers of other backgrounds, one thing I come up against is, I read other reviews on the website, and although my name isn't visible, my reaction to some of the things that I point out in my reviews might make it might point out oh, this person might be of color, and how do you give your reviewers the confidence to be yes, you can point out these things, we will back you up, don't feel like you have to make it this mundane kind of
That makes sense.
mundane kind of oh yes, it's great character development, and feel free to say when she said this person had an untamed afro, it's okay to say that is fucked up.
Right.
So yeah.
So I'm gonna revoice this for the back.
Okay.
Okay. So in a very condensed manner, she's saying that when we write reviews, how do we have the ability to put our own identities out there? In other words, I know something about this subject, therefore you better fucking listen to me.
Yeah. That's a great question, and I think it's sort of an ongoing process. We develop relationships, hopefully, with our reviewers. We don't always know them face to face. Sometimes we see them in conferences, but we email a lot back and forth, and we try to provide feedback. The tricky thing is the editors don't read all the books that we assign for review. We're placing a whole lot of trust in the reviewer. We're going to give you this thing, and we're going to mostly trust that you're going to do it justice on both sides, highlighting the good stuff, surfacing the really problematic stuff. And we're going to back you up, and we try to have that trustful relationship where, if you, especially if you're highlighting problematic, offensive, harmful content, I actually struggle with the opposite problem. Most of my reviewers either don't see it yet and haven't been trained to see it yet, or they see it but they're not quite sure how to articulate it. So my problem is getting them to that point where they see it and recognizing it, and then helping them articulate it, in this much of space, for our reviews. And when we're recruiting reviewers, sometimes I'm specifically going after people who are really vocal and who are really good at spotting that stuff. And just when they come aboard saying, not only can you do that, we need you to do that. And if it means using some harsh language and throwing some F-bombs in your review, we're probably going to edit that out. But put it in there for now. Put it in the notes, and we'll work with you.
Ridiculous.
We need to come up with a nice way of spelling fucks, like some PHs. I'm going to interrupt the flow of conversation here because Alex does need to get to her signing. She's going to be...
Their signing.
I'm sorry, thank you. Alex is going to be going to their signing up at table 5. So if you want to follow up this conversation, I'm sure that's a thing that could happen.
I'll keep talking.
Okay. Excellent. And I want to thank everybody here for participating and putting yourselves out there and being vulnerable.